tent on a tiny island, totally inaccessible, northeastern Greenland, and you have polar bears coming on shore and coming to visit you, well, I cannot say I felt like I was part of nature. I felt more like, running away.
Unlimited creativity, welcome to Sounds Like Portraits. I'm Philippe Ungar. For this episode, I met adventurer and entrepreneur Luc Hardy, president of Sagax. In 1987, Luc went to Nepal to try to climb the Annapurnas, and wow, it just blew him away. At the time, there was no internet, no communication, nothing. Just him surrounded by the wild nature. And since then, he has led several scientific expeditions and has become a dedicated environmental advocate. It's time to listen to him. But before, he told me what he tried to do all his life.
All my life, I've always tried to be basically curious and looking outside the box and experimenting and going into different directions. I would say that's a common thread in all I've been doing since I can remember.
What drives your curiosity? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, that's what I tell myself anyway, being from Brittany and northern Brittany, where maybe there is not much to do, and traditionally people were traveling quite a bit and going outside, to another world, if not a new world. So there is some parental influence, especially father being in the army and having traveled a lot. And even though we were from a very modest environment, family background, was lucky to be exposed to very different cultures through these photographs and stories from my father, and stamp collecting.
Stamp collecting.
Yeah, stamp collecting came in my life at a very early age, as far back as I can remember, from my father, who discovered stamp collecting from his own travels, going to Indochina, Vietnam, Thailand, which then was Siam. And, he was coming back with absolutely beautiful big stamps, some with like golden covers and all that. That really opened my mind and imagination to totally different worlds and certainly countries. I probably told myself then that, someday I would discover these countries and locations in person.
So we're going to talk about creativity. You're an entrepreneur and an adventurer. Are there any common point between leading an expedition and managing your company?
Certainly. I mean, I consider myself an entrepreneur, even though I've been more on the shareholder side and co-creator or facilitator than top management or executive in all the startups I've been involved with over the years. But I also consider myself an entrepreneur in expeditions and in exploration in a way. And certainly there are similarities in a sense that in both cases you have to help assemble a team of talents, of people with different skills, complementary skills, skills which will be helpful when you need them, different languages often, different countries. There is one other aspect now that I think of it is fundraising, both in entrepreneurship and starting a technology startup. You do have to raise money typically to fund a company. When you do exploration, expeditions, same thing. You spend half your time raising money from various sources to finance your projects. So yeah, absolutely, there are similarities. Talking about creativity, I mean, of course, all the time you have to be creative, think out of the box, come up with new ideas to overcome challenges, You have to find solutions to problems, and probably the ones able to solve more problems more easily are the ones who have different experiences, like lateral experiences, like they've done it in that field, maybe that would apply in that field. And in a way, I think I'm a bit like that.
A translator.
Exactly. I'm a big believer in lateral thinking, in a way, in copying what has been proven to work in another field, and in seeing if it's going to help you in the field you're in at that time, at this minute.
I thought you would say taking risks.
For sure, taking risk is part of entrepreneurship and creating a new business, whether it's a technology startup or going to the North Pole or organizing a mountaineering expedition. You do take risks, but in the tech world, and that would apply to any entrepreneurship project, you take risk, but if it doesn't work, you're probably not going to die. You might have no money, you might be in trouble, you might have problems with other people, but still you'll recover. In the exploration world, adventure world, sometimes you want to take risk for getting some knowledge or some point of view or some photo or some film or something, and literally it can be a decision of, well, I should not do that because there is a risk of dying. So that's probably the difference between the two worlds.
How would you describe what an adventurous spirit is?
For me, being adventurous certainly means being curious, getting excited by the process of discovering new things, new places, new people. Yeah, it's a wonder of discovery.
About your expeditions, how did everything start in your mind? I mean, your first expedition.
If there was an epiphany, it was when I was in a kind of a sabbatical year I had taken when I left my consulting job in New York to seek a new occupation for the next phase of my life. And I went to Nepal for a month with a good friend of mine who had been there before, and we trekked around the Annapurnas, and wow, it just blew me away. The mountains, the altitude, the people, the beauty, the nature. Obviously, there was absolutely no communications then, so no calling anyone, no selfies, nothing, just us and the universe, literally. And that really opened my mind to exploration, in a sense of going far away in a remote place, not too many people or none, and just appreciating and learning and discovering new countries, new cultures. And I think it's from that time, which was 1987, that grew the desire to formalize this a little more and do more of these travels, but not just as a trekking tourist, but more as a kind of an engineer, scientist, going on location and learning and discovering what are the challenges in the country where I am, and what can we do, what can we bring, what can we report about what we are seeing.
To witness.
Exactly, yeah, bearing witness of the issues of the moment for that particular system, population, ecosystem where I was. That's probably where the exploration part of my life came from.
What is that personal feeling you got in front of that wild nature?
Wow. I think there's a wow is definitely something, even though you don't shout it necessarily in front of these mountains or whatever you're looking at. In my particular case, what I really, really enjoyed and still enjoy is the very, very remote and wild nature, especially the Arctic regions, either Arctic or Antarctic. When you are in, totally remote places, very hard to reach in northern Canada, northern Greenland, around the North Pole, you're basically by yourself, or yourselves, if you're with, like in my case, with a couple people, but you're still very a super small group. And nature there is just immense. It's remote. It's magical. There is something otherworldly about it. Magical. It's just incredible. It's almost like anything psychedelic. It's hard to put in words because you.
Is it the feeling of a profound connection?
Yeah, I mean, I've done lots of meditation, and I consider myself not just, me, and then there is the rest of the world. I've always thought that, however corny it is to say that we are part of nature. It's interesting because in a way you feel a little less part of nature because it's so different. I mean, when you are under a tent on a tiny island, totally inaccessible, northeastern Greenland, and you have polar bears coming on shore and coming to visit you, well, I cannot say I felt like I was part of nature. I felt more like, running away. But definitely there is a quality about that nature that we see there, which is so hard to access that it's the holy grail of nature in a way, and it brings us back to what nature should be, and that certainly we should protect it, which happens to have been my cause for the last 25 years, working to help as modestly as I can the environmental causes, and trying to be an advocate and communicate on these subjects.
You're talking about meditation. What is your biggest learning from these experiences in the wild nature?
Wherever I go is really about enjoying the moment and just being in state of awe at how fantastic that is, how beautiful it is. Although sometimes, you see problems and pollutions, or a plastic bag in a remote island and northeastern Arctic off the coast of Siberia, but pretty much it's all untouched and gorgeous, magnificent, and I just enjoyed this particular moment, which is the carpe diem trait of my personality, which is do what you want to do today.
How long are your expeditions?
Typically, I would say it's about a month, 4 to 6 weeks, especially if you're going to go to the Arctic regions. Just the access to Antarctica might take a week or more for my personal enjoyment, because I should say these expeditions are also about being selfish too. That's what I like to do, and I want to enjoy myself. And in addition to helping and contributing, I've no shame in saying that. I'm doing this because I like it. I prefer to go for 3-4 weeks at a time as opposed to just a week.
How do you select the right people who are going to work together in an hostile environment?
When you assemble a team to go to crazy places, sure, you want to make sure they have a great resume in terms of what you're going to need for each individual. For example, when I went to subantarctic islands, South Georgia, in October 2014, I needed a boat, a sailboat. So I interviewed 9 skippers, owners of their boat. All of them, in theory, could have brought me to where I wanted to go. But some were really, shaky. Either the boat or the skipper was, I could feel that either they had not been there enough, they didn't have enough experience, or they were taking lightly some points I thought should be more thoroughly thought of. And eventually I contracted with an Australian skipper who had been to the region where I wanted to go 19 times. So I knew he had the experience, if we were caught in a storm in these places where you are at best 3-4 days from sailing, not even another landmass with people on, but maybe 3-4 days from a cruise ship or some other ship. You have to make sure you are with the right person. And for the other skills, and it depends on the functionalities I'm trying to fill, if it's science or a mountain guide or cameraman, or I interview them. Often they are recommended by people I know well. In the Arctic, you cannot lie to yourself or to someone else, because very quickly it's a drama and it's known, and the person is out of the system.
And what happens when it really happens?
Well, when it really happens, yeah, it can be a problem. It can be, you're camping in the wrong place, or the.
Did you experience that?
Well, I almost experienced that in that particular expedition in the subantarctic islands, without giving names. With the group, part of the group, we were just on one side of the ridge of a mountain in South Georgia, kind of late in the day, and some more, I would say, riskier type, but maybe a little bit more stupid type too, unfortunately. Wanted to go over that pass and try to finish the day. And some others, including me, were more leaning towards, well, let's stay on this side of the pass, let's put our tent up, and tomorrow we have the entire day to finish the thing. And eventually, well, I prevailed because I was expedition leader, so I said, okay, we're going to camp here. And I'm so thankful to to me and the rest of the group that we made that decision, because the next day, when we finished this part of the expedition, the last day was more like 6-7 hours of hard work, and not just 2 hours that the other part of the group thought it would take. It was not a mistake to have taken these people with me, even though they were thinking more aggressively, because you need different type of opinions, and we're not all clones in an expedition like this. In a way, it works, because we collectively, even though I made the final decision, we made the good decision in the middle of nowhere.
Your expeditions are dedicated to science, to better know nature. What did you learn about human beings?
In terms of humans, well, there are some signs, definitely, that I've seen, which I was not expecting to see. Signs of the consequences of what us humans have done in other parts of the world, and the consequences it has. And it's just amazing how things can happen, 10,000 miles away. When you do something here, well, it has consequences everywhere. Probably the most amazing thing is how people, and I'm talking maybe globally, not just the expedition type of travel, but travels in general, how people, even in very remote conditions, whether it's a meteorologist in a weather station on the Arctic coast in northeastern Russia, or a child in the slums of Dhaka in Bangladesh, how these people are optimistic, smiling most of the time, excited about, where they are, what they're doing, and just optimistic about life in general. Most of the people I've met through travels and expeditions in particular are kind of happy to be where they are and excited. I would have thought, well, these guys in their weather station, I mean, they must be horrible, and wow, when we meet them, what kind of people are we going to find? And just people like, in a way like me, they're just nice people, optimistic, they do their things, and so that's, I think that says a lot about human nature, subjected to environmental stress or poverty, and just people make it one day at a time, and they enjoy their lives.
You're a photographer and director. Are you saddened by the vanishing beauty of the wild nature?
Well, yes, I've had a chance to photograph a lot and film a lot. The filming has been more through, cameramen I've brought, or women I've brought in my expeditions. I'm actually probably more excited than saddened. Yes, I mean, you can't help being horrified when you see literally tons of plastic debris on a beautiful stretch of white sand beaches in southern Cuba, or in the middle of Raja Ampat in Micronesia. These islands are just so far from anything, and yeah, you see plastic on these beaches. Why? And now we know why, but that is frightening and saddening. But overall, it's just so immense, so full of hope and potential if we collectively do something about it, and preserving all this in its stage, or at least making sure it's not disappearing or decaying too fast. I'm pretty excited by the beauty of the world, whether it's above water at a high altitude or high latitude, or underwater, and like in Curacao at about minus 200 meters. Amazing, what we can see, how beautiful it is, and it's basically totally unknown and almost untouched. But there is work to keep it that way for sure. Yeah.
What is your strongest memory as an adventurer?
Well, I hope it's going to be the next one in my next expedition or project. But in terms of excitement, would probably be in South Georgia in a Shackleton expedition we did 4 years ago, being, kind of lost in a mountain and with 100-kilometer winds coming up, and having to decide if we're going to set up a tent for the night, or if we are going to dig in a ledge of snow to do some kind of an igloo there. And the little group we were not too proud of where we were at. That was threatening and exciting at the same time.
And risky.
For sure. I mean, again, I asked after that day to our friends, well, do you think we had a chance to die? And, probably not. But if that tent had flown away at that time, 9 people up there in a mountain with this kind of wind, well, we could have been seriously frozen for a while. And luckily, the next day was good weather, another day of that weather without a tent. Who knows what could have happened.
What's your next expedition?
Well, I have several projects I'm working on in development, say probably 8 or 10. Some involve ocean work, coral reefs, and looking at the situation of island communities, island nations, like Kiribati in the Pacific, or Maldives, or islands like Cohiba off coast of Panama. So I'm probably going to do something there with a scientist from Scripps Institution of Oceanography in California. I have also a project I'm working on which involves the origin of domestic horses and polo. Happen to be a polo player, and I've been for 25 plus years, and I'm very much interested by the future of the domestic horse and the polo pony in particular. Polo ponies are today being cloned in Argentina, mainly in Argentina, and I think it's very exciting, especially for me, because it's a mixing the world of technology and obviously biology, genomics, and the world of discovery, history, expedition in my case. I'm probably going to go in Central Asia sometime this summer or fall on locations of new new sites which might give clues to the origin of the domestic horse.
I'm gonna leave the room. Please hold the microphone and add whatever you want to the interview.
Well, one thing I would add to the general public, especially to younger generations, is always be curious. Don't take for granted what you're being told. If we go back to the theme here of being creative is really going out of your usual thinking, challenge what you're being told, be aggressive in your curiosity at the risk of being considered nosy. Go for it, and from these new ideas will come up, and you will be impressed by what you can accomplish. Okay, Philippe.
Thank you, Luc Hardy, for sharing your story. It was Sounds Like Portraits, a podcast by Philippe Ungar. Music Charmeuse de Serpent, composed and conducted by Olivier Glisson. See you soon for the next episode.